nowadays I'm leaning towards Google. If someone says,
Okay.
hey, I don't really have the budget to do one or the other,
Mhm.
and all things being equal, I would say, well, let's start with Google because we're just tending to see better results there lately.
Mhm.
But there are things that could influence that. If they have a really strong social game, they have great creative assets, they've got great videos, they've got strong branding, they've got a good offer, and maybe I look at Google and I say, this is a newer product, there really isn't existing demand for it. That's the thing with Google is there has to be demand, it has to exist to really leverage that. And if the demand isn't there because it's something new or the market just isn't aware of it, it's going to be really tough to make Google work right off the bat. Whereas if you go the social route and if we have strong creatives, we have strong branding, we've got a good USP, then we can leverage that with social easier than we could on Google, right?
This is just the beginning.
Welcome back to another episode of the E-commerce Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Ramin, and thanks for tuning in today. If you're watching this on YouTube, take a quick minute and subscribe to our channel. And if you're listening to this on any of your favorite podcast networks, stop and give us a review if you like what you're hearing. Make sure to stay tuned towards the end of the podcast for an amazing tip from our guest that is sure to kick your e-commerce business into high gear. Today, we're talking about paid advertising through Google, Facebook, and even Amazon. Our guest is a bona fide expert in this field. He's a founder and CEO of ExactClick Digital, a paid advertising agency which helps brands with high average order values generate an eye-popping 6 to 12% return on ad spend, or as we like to call it, ROAS, with a proven system that they have been executing time after time. Our guest is also a huge fan of the Tolkien books. We'll have to find out a little bit more about this. I'm always curious when somebody has a passion, how does it fit into their personal and their business lives? So without any further ado, please welcome Leo Ebbert to the E-commerce Revolution podcast. Leo, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Ramin. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Thank you for making the time. And I love this topic. As we'll talk about, maybe I have some questions in the end related to my days as a retailer and hiring paid advertising agencies. So I'm always fascinated with this topic and how it's changed over time. So before we get into that, I got to ask you about your passion for the Tolkien books. First, which one's your favorite? I got to know, do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I got to say it's The Hobbit. I mean, he wrote it. It's just the book is better than the movies. As is almost always the case, right? But it's actually a funny book. He wrote it kind of this humorous, journey through this epic adventure. But it's actually very funny, especially when you realize it was written, so long ago in the early 1900s, essentially.
Wow,
I like that one a lot.
I didn't realize it came from that perspective. So, if that's your favorite, and have you read, all of them, almost every single one?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, most of the things that are out there to be read, I have explored them. Yeah.
Okay. So now this is the part that I'm curious about. This is an area that you love. Have you ever drawn any parallels between what's in the book and business? Is there anything that's ever popped out as you're reading? You're like, you know what? Maybe that could be something I could apply in my business or an approach or anything like that.
Yeah, definitely. There are always lessons. I mean, it's probably not going to make a list of top business books ever, but I think like just seeing things through to the end. I mean, they go on these amazing journeys and adventures, and there's always like points at which they can give up or stop or turn aside, and they always push through and find a way to succeed.
There you go. I think that sums up our most of our business journeys, or at least the ones that we hope are going to be our business journeys. That final succession at the end. Did we succeed? Did we pass the business on to somebody else in the family and continue its legacy? So that's very cool. Well, I appreciate it. I always love to know. I have not. I'll be honest. I've seen the movies. haven't read the books. So I should probably sit down. But they're very intimidating. They're very big. They're very very large books to read. Do you actually still read them? Actually, do you look at the paper? Do you get the paperback version, or have you moved on to Audible?
No, I like reading the physical book. I think for me, that just works better for my brain. And plus, I stare at a screen all day, so it's nice to look at paper sometimes.
Yes. No, I'm with you. I've recently actually gone back to a few books that have inspired me in the past and gone and purchased them because I mean I love Audible. Audible's great, and you can whip through things very quickly. But that old school feeling, which my kids probably would never understand what that means. Like Dad, what's that in your hand? It's a book of some
Right.
kind. I'm not really sure. So, well, let's get into paid advertising because that's what we're here to talk about. Here to help merchants understand it better. Kind of figure out, where everything is going in the paid advertising world. Your agency, Exact Click Digital, which we'll obviously have a link to in the show notes, runs paid advertising, as we said, on Google, Bing, Facebook, Amazon. So just tell me, is there, on average, which one of these platforms are you able, is you and your team able to generate a higher return on ad spend, or that ROAS number that we look for?
Nowadays, it tends to be Google more than, say, Facebook. It used to be Facebook, or at least they would always be kind of neck and neck when we would
Mm-hmm.
compare results across clients to say who's driving the most revenue, the biggest bang for your ad dollar. But since the iOS 14 change, last year, that was a really kind of seismic shift on Facebook, and we're still seeing fallout from it. And so, because of that, Google, I think we tend to see better results there. We've seen a lot of ad dollars shifting from Facebook to Google, not abandoning Facebook by any means, but just pushing more to Google because you have less of a question about attribution. It's a little bit easier to
Right.
tell what's driving the result there, especially in search. Someone's searching for a specific thing, right? And if they click on the
Mm-hmm.
keyword, they're more serious and know that they bought or if they didn't buy it. So that's where most people, I think, if they're looking to scale, or not necessarily scale even, but just be more efficient with their ad spend, they're going to get that primarily from Google over Facebook nowadays.
Nice. And within Google, within that ecosystem, is shopping, is that still the dominant area where people focus, most of their dollars on in the world of e-commerce?
It tends to be, yeah.
Yeah.
Shopping is going to be typically your best channel. Then you'll have search. Definitely some display retargeting. That's usually a safe and channel that produces well for people. And then you'd probably down the list to some YouTube ads, something like
Hmm.
that. But yeah, it's generally going to be shopping first, and then search second.
And how does retargeting fit into this? Retargeting, for those who maybe don't know about it, retargeting, obviously, as I like to call them, those creepy ads that follow you around, but not as creepy anymore. I think people are mostly used to them now, and it's become second nature. But where does retargeting fit into the mix?
Within Google itself, I mean, you can do retargeting for sure on Google. I don't think it's never going to be as effective because it's display advertising.
Hmm.
Banner blindness. People really don't pay attention to the banners, right? Not as much
Right.
as say on Facebook retargeting. You can, I think, just by the nature of Facebook retargeting, it's always going to be better. The
Hmm.
only question is the attribution side on Facebook, right? Because
Hmm.
if you retarget on Facebook, you can show really relevant creative. You can use a video. You can use more content, and you can really try to pull them away from their Facebook feed. It's a lot harder to do
Hmm.
that with display ads, though.
Interesting. And what about Amazon? I mean, obviously dependent on having your products on Amazon. What's that like? And how does the return on ad spend look like in the world of Amazon? I mean, I've seen numbers of how much revenue Amazon's generating from paid advertising, which is amazing because this wasn't even a business several years ago. It wasn't even really like, an important element. They've really ramped it up quickly.
And they have monetized that whole area of their website and leveraged it incredibly well. It's great for them, great for Amazon's bottom line. It's not as great for merchants because it's
Mm,
essentially forced all the more merchants. If you want to get traffic, you pretty much have to buy it. And if you go search
mhm,
for anything on Amazon, really anything above the fold is almost always going to be an ad, right?
mhm,
So in order to be competitive, that means you've got to pay for the ads yourselves. And even they've gotten to points where you even have to defend the space on your listing. Okay, I don't know if you've
hmm.
noticed, but if you go to a product listing, there are ads on that
Yeah.
page. So
Right.
they might
Yes.
be searching for your whatever product it is. They come to your product page and they're going to see your competitors' products on the page,
Hmm.
right? So Amazon's kind of forced merchants to defend that space by advertising on their own product page.
So is it safe to say that if you're going to sell on Amazon, you have to do paid advertising on Amazon, or else you're just basically going to be lost in that mix of massive product?
I mean, pretty much. If you've got, that some of those coveted labels, like the Amazon, I can't remember what they call it, but preferred product or something like that.
Right. Hmm.
You have a ton of reviews. You've sold a ton of products. You might be able to get away with less of an ad spend, but man, it's tough to compete on Amazon without throwing
Hmm.
dollars at the ad platform.
It's brilliant. I mean, yes, if we're looking at it from a business standpoint, I mean, what they have done is, reduced their need of carrying inventory, handed it over to the marketplace, and the marketplace has grown. They take a cut of that, and then it's so crowded that you have to run ads on there. And then, by the way, you also need to use their fulfillment center as well. You know,
Right.
hats off to that. I know that, that's probably a touchy subject with many people, drives them nuts, about Amazon. But, just looking at, all those elements in there. But it's nice to hear that Google is still, I mean, it was, ages ago. I know Facebook obviously jumped in there and really took a lot of market share away. But, at the end of the day, Google's maintained what really drives their business too. I mean, ads are what drive their business. That's how they make their money. And, I think they do it I think their platform is very effective. Would you agree, to that in terms of platforms? Google's platform is still very strong in terms of operating within it.
Yeah, what they will always have is customer intent. And
Hmm.
Facebook, I mean, right now they don't have it. I guess you could say with the marketplace, they can, Facebook Marketplace, they can say, hey, people are searching for a specific product, and there we've got intent, right?
Hmm.
Whereas on Facebook, or sorry, Google, most of it is intent based, right? So it's going to be
Hmm.
they searched for something and they either saw your product in a shopping ad or they saw a text ad
Hmm.
from the search result. We know that someone is intending something, right?
Right.
Whereas on Facebook, we have to basically convince them to leave their intent, right? So if someone goes on Facebook, they're not there to shop usually, right? They're there to
Right.
scroll, they're there to see what's new, they're there to
Hmm.
argue, they're there to annoy people or just see pictures or whatever their intent is. It's not to shop,
Yes.
okay? And
Yeah.
we have to pull them from that intent into a
Hmm.
different purpose. And
Yeah.
Google will never have that problem the way Facebook has that problem.
Yeah, that's a very important word, intent, because I've always felt that too. I mean, we do, yes, we go to Google to learn something, to find something, to take action, and Facebook, we're just perusing, trying to
Right.
consume content, kill time. So it makes it harder to pull them away, as you said. That it's very important to remember too that especially maybe, and this kind of leads into my next question is when you're evaluating a new, when you're working with a new prospect and, deciding if they're going to be a client, and let's say they haven't spent an immense amount of money, but maybe now they're open to it. They're open to, a higher budget, maybe $5,000 a month or more on paid advertising. What do you look at in terms of making a decision on which platform is right for them? Obviously, Amazon aside, because they need to have products on Amazon, but how do you make a decision which is the right platform?
Well, by default nowadays, I'm leaning towards Google. If someone says,
Okay.
"Hey, I don't really have the budget to do one or the other,"
Hmm.
and all things being equal, I would say, well, let's start with Google because we're just tending to see better results there lately.
Hmm.
But there are things that could influence that. If they have a really strong social game, they have great creative assets, they've got great videos, they've got strong branding, they've got a good offer, and maybe I look at Google and I say, this is a newer product. There really isn't existing demand for it. That's the thing with Google is there has to be demand. It has to exist to really
Hmm.
leverage that. And if the demand isn't there because it's something new or so the marketplace just isn't aware of it, it's going to be really
Hmm.
tough to make Google work right off the bat. Whereas if you go the social route and if we have strong creatives, we have strong branding, we've got a good, USP, then we can leverage that on social easier than we could on Google, right?
Hmm.
Those are kind of the things I would go through. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, where does Bing fit into all of this? They're still there. They're hanging on.
Sort of. I mean, yeah, they're there. And so I always encourage clients to get on Bing because
Hmm.
it's typically, it's never gonna just make your quarter or anything, right? Or make your year, but
Hmm.
it's pretty reliable incremental revenue. All right. And the reason it also depends on who your demographic is because The demographic on Bing tends to be older because it's
Hmm.
people who buy a Microsoft computer and just
Yeah,
don't know enough to switch the browser and they just use what's on
sure.
there, right? So it
Right.
defaults to Bing. But also, the older demographic, they tend to have money and they tend to spend it on
Hmm.
things because they're through that phase where they're worried so much about paycheck to paycheck and it's like they're in
Hmm.
retirement. They've got money to spend.
Interesting.
So if your demographic is older, you definitely should be on Bing because those people are there. And but like I
Hmm.
said, volume is always going to be an issue there because it's just such a small piece of the market. But it
Hmm.
does tend to be reliable incremental revenue.
Do you duplicate your efforts essentially what you're doing on Google? Are you able to like just essentially like replicate it on Bing, or do you have to use a completely different strategy?
Generally, yes. So that's the starting point. We would get
Hmm.
everything in Google, just I mean, very clean, very tight, and then we would import the campaigns. But we
Hmm.
don't just kind of wholesale, say, okay, Bing import the campaign every week or every day or something like that.
Hmm.
Because they each need different optimizations, and we do find there's significant differences between the two at times. So we optimize them
Hmm.
separately. That doesn't take as much time to optimize Bing, so we don't have to charge a
Hmm.
lot for that, especially since it's kind of this lower, this incrementally
Sure.
it's good, but it's not really good volume.
Hmm.
But yeah, we do use Google as a starting point to kind of just like how we would map out campaigns, but then we would like tend to optimize a little bit differently on Bing.
Interesting. Yeah, the trending older concept there with Bing is interesting to me and makes total sense given the relationship to Microsoft out there, and any of the kids out there who have never been on Bing. It's a search engine. You can actually go on it and type in, go to Bing.com. Yeah, you probably never even
Right.
played around on it. So
Yeah, they actually
go
dropped the name Bing a year or two ago. So it's called Microsoft Advertising technically. But yeah, I think
within.
most
So
people think of it as
the
Bing. Yeah.
Bing, right? Yeah, so it still comes up in there as Bing. So just tell me in terms of something I noticed when I was reading up, doing a little research, on your company and the approach that you guys take. You guys you look at you focus on brands with high average order values or AOVs, and you actually stated a number of 300. What's the significance of that number?
Yeah, so it's really just something we've noticed with our clients. Now, some of our clients have a really high AOV, right? 1,000 bucks
Hmm.
to $2,000.
Hmm.
But yeah, once you get past that $300 mark,
Hmm.
the numbers it's kind of a question of the math because when you're on social, you're almost always going to pay a minimum CPM.
Hmm.
Okay, cost per thousand
Okay.
impressions.
Hmm.
And if you're only charging, $40, getting an average order of $40, you got to do a lot more volume than someone who's got an average order of 200 or $300, right?
Hmm. Right.
So there's kind of that sweet spot. If you can get that AOV higher,
Hmm.
then you really have a much easier shot at this economy of scale between, say, Facebook's CPMs or Google's cost per clicks and being able to convert it at a high enough rate to recoup those costs. So the
Hmm.
lower the
Hmm.
AOV, the tighter it's going to be and the harder it's going to be. Not that it's impossible. We've got, plenty of clients and worked with plenty of brands that have an AOV of $55, right?
Hmm.
So it just depends on your positioning in the marketplace and how your creatives and all that. But we found that the higher the AOV, we've kind of developed a system and a methodology around that that works really well. And we found that like
Mm.
once you cross that $300 line, we can really
Mm.
leverage that and really make some noise for them on their ad campaign.
Nice. So what if I come to you and I have a lower AOV, maybe my AOV is 50, 75, but you start to look at the business and you realize that I'm not really doing a good enough job maybe on site to, or post purchase or any of those elements to increase. I have great opportunity to increase. Do you and your team actually get in there and make recommendations like, you should talk to a CRO person, or, you really should, implement some, if you're on Shopify, take a look at some of the apps out there that would help you increase that average order. Do you get into that type of consultation with clients?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I wouldn't bill ourselves as specifically UX or CRO experts, but
Hmm.
I've been doing this for so long, and I've seen so many stores and so many clients. I know I have a good sense for, hey,
Hmm.
this client should be doing this or they should not be doing that. And absolutely,
Hmm.
once I get into their account, I go through analytics. I look for obvious things like that,
Hmm.
site speed, for example, or if they're not leveraging reviews, or some of this like afterpay, those kinds of things that can increase your conversion rate. those are certainly
hmm
things that, I look at and I say, hey, we could be converting
hmm
better. These are some things I've noticed with other stores that you might want to consider that could improve these numbers. Because if we get our conversion rate up, that has such
Yeah.
a huge downstream effect on ads, right?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. No, and I think and it's amazing, really. I mean, you can continue to squeeze that, or push that AOV up. There's so many ways to do it. And, merchants, brands, as they build businesses, the business gets bigger and, you start losing sight of, you're dealing with organizational matters. You start to forget that, oh, you know what? Sometimes there's some really simple tweaks that you can make to help push that number up, which obviously then helps, what you're, the efforts that you're doing on the paid advertising side of things. So let's switch and talk a little bit about revenue and profit. Now, obviously, revenue is great, right? We love that top line. Love to see that revenue go up, but profit is the name of the game when it comes to a business. This is how you're going to build your business. Tell me, what, when factoring profitability of an ad campaign, like specifically the ad campaign, what things should an e-commerce brand owner take into account? And what would you show them, I guess, maybe on a report that is showing them that their ads are profitable? Cost of goods have to be factored in, I assume, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, so this is where my background really, I think, benefits my clients. I started my career as an accountant. Okay. I got my
Right.
CPA and I worked in that field for a few years. I'm no longer a CPA. I don't practice in it at all, but that's where, I come from. I'm very analytical. I know how to break down numbers. And the biggest shortcoming I see with a lot of brands that they don't even exactly know how to figure it out is lifetime value. Okay.
hmm
So a lot of brands that they think they know what the lifetime value is, or they have this
Right.
nebulous idea. Well, we assume people might come back and buy a few times, but the true LTV is often very different from what people assume or what people
Hmm.
think. And if you figure out a legitimate lifetime value, it has a massive impact on what you should be doing with your ads, because it impacts what your target ROAS should be. It impacts,
hmm
so if you take brand A and brand B, they have the similar products, similar margins, similar markups, and all that. One brand knows their LTV is this, the other brand has no idea. The brand that
hmm
has no idea is flying blind, right? They don't know what their ROAS really should be. They might say, hey, we need a 3x. And the
hmm
reality is maybe their lifetime value is good enough that they only need a 2x. And they could be scaling a lot more at 2x than at 3x, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
or it could be that their lifetime value is just not that great and they think it's
hmm
better than it is and they really need a 5x, but they think they're good at 3x, right?
Right.
So that's the biggest impact, I think, when you're talking about revenue. Yeah, you're right. Revenue is great, but you've got to make money on the bottom line. It's got to make sense.
hmm
And the only way you'll know if you're making money is if you know the lifetime value of your customer.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's funny. When I was doing this, when I was on the online retail side, I'd always bring into the conversation my margins because they mattered. They were, the team was running paid ads, and they were looking at the return on ad spend. They were looking at the top line, and I was saying, all right, well, let me factor out my cost of goods. Let me see what that actually looks like, and are we hitting that return on ad spend based on that, because I had to spend money to get that product too. I mean, that is obviously the name of the game in there. So that's good and very important, I think, to remember, not to get fully enamored by just the revenue. Really dig in there and look at the profit. How, is this profitable? Because otherwise, several years into it, you're going to come to realize, wow, I am really overspending to get those customers in the door. And I haven't, on top of it, maybe haven't done anything about increasing my customer lifetime value as well. So super, super important in there. So let's just pause for a second and a little bit word from SKU Agency.
So I have a question for you. Is your online store generating at least 30% of its revenue from email and SMS marketing? Here at SKU Agency, we have a strategic solution for that. As Klaviyo advisors, we've helped our clients generate millions in revenue from email and SMS alone. Combining the power of both of these channels is key to really reaching your customers and the overall success of your e-commerce business. But to help you better understand the value of email and SMS working together, we decided to offer a limited time, complimentary 45-point audit that will break down that opportunity for you. To get your free audit, go to skuagency.com and click the Book a Call button to get started. Now back to the show.
So, Leo, I mentioned to you a couple times in the past that, I ran my own retail business ages ago. It's been a long time since I've done that. It was a dropship business, and we hired pay-per-click advertising agencies at the time to get us into. We did Facebook and we did we did Google and all obviously, but we were dropships, so our margins were low. We had lower margins, which didn't make for very effective pay-per-click advertising opportunities in there. So when you evaluate a new prospect, do you look at their margins? Is that one of the questions you bring up? And where do you draw the line? Let's say they have only 25% or 30% margin on a product. Would you ever say, no, you really shouldn't be running paid ads?
It would depend. So yeah, drop shipping it tends to be tough. Okay. Because if you're going up against someone that can sell the same product with a 50% margin because they're the manufacturer or because they're, a high volume distributor or something like that, you're probably not going to win. I mean, they can just afford to spend so much more on ads that they can easily price you out of the ad inventory, right? It's just not that hard if you're at 25 and they're 50. So yeah, drop shipping can be tough. Now, if everybody's playing with the same margins, the manufacturer is going to enforce MAP really well, and they themselves are not competing with you in that space. But yeah, you can make it work. I've seen it work, but it is hard. Okay, the better your margins, the easier it is, obviously, to make ads work because you've got a bigger margin for error. So if ad costs go up as they tend to go up and down throughout the year, especially during big, peak holiday seasons, you're going to have some room baked in there to kind of flex with that if you have strong margins. So yeah, it is something we would look at and talk to with a client. It is something we ask about in discovery is tell us about your margins and also if they've had success with ads in the past, even if they are lower margin, we're fairly confident that if they've had success, we can duplicate it and even grow on it and build on it, right? But it's definitely an important question. It's something that a brand would need to look at and think, okay, if my margins are super tight, ads may not be the model for me, right? It may be an SEO approach or influencers or something else, right?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And tell me about budget, because this is probably like a number one question, right? That comes up. How much should I spend, Leo? What should I, how much should I dedicate towards this? How do you make that determination? I mean, if you have past data, obviously there's, you can look at their account and start making some assessments. But what if you don't have any data? What if this is a new brand that, is going to invest? But that's the question that comes up. How do you make that decision on where to start with budget?
Right. Yeah. If it's existing or something, a brand that has some history, we would certainly start with the ad account stuff, do an audit, look at what they were doing before and try to kind of assess, okay, how much of this spend was wasted? Okay. Good. And we see that a lot. There's a lot of wasted ad spend. So we'd say, okay, if we can either redirect that wasted ad spend, we can keep budget the same, or we can just trim that fat off and get the same, bottom line benefit with a lower budget, right? If it's a new brand, like you're describing, it's a company saying, hey, I'm going to put money into a new venture. I've come up with a product I think it's going to work. Done some proof of concept on it to determine that there is a need for this in the marketplace. And I've gotten money set aside to put into it. Then generally a brand like that is going to want to approach this with an incremental approach, like saying, hey, let's start with one channel, Facebook or Google, whichever one we think is going to be the best out of the gate. And let's start with some basic campaigns. I generally would advise a new brand like that. You got to at least spend something like $100 a day. Okay? I mean, you really should be willing to spend at least something like that just to get a sense for, you got to establish some baseline metrics. What are your click-through rates going to be? What's your conversion rate going to be? And you can learn some of those lessons with a relatively low ad spend like that. But, really, if you want to, I also tell brands, I'm a big believer in the fail fast model. Okay. Because if you go about this too slowly, all you're doing is just prolonging this, very arduous and kind of painful learning experience. Right? It's like, how long am I going to punish myself? I could punish myself over 6 months, or I could punish myself over 3 months, right? And learn all of my lessons in 3 months, and then use that as the launching pad for successful ads, right? So the lower your budget is, you're really just protracting that learning phase. And that's the downside. Right. And so from a business owner's perspective, I know they think, hey, I want to put out as little cash as possible to learn my lessons. And that's fair. But there is a point at which you're just making it last longer than it needs to. And then you have to consider opportunity costs.
Right, right. That's interesting. Well, I mean, I feel like paid advertising has become more and more complex over the years. At least since I, got into that world. Would you agree that it is more complex? There's more that you have to figure out along the way.
Yeah, I think it's always changing. The landscape is always shifting.
Hmm.
It's never the same, even from quarter to quarter, year to year. The approach we took last year, it wouldn't work today, honestly. And
Hmm.
we've learned that because it stopped working, right? And
Hmm.
so that's where
Yeah.
you have to always be testing. You always have to have a portion of your budget that's saying, "Hey, we're gonna think outside the box with this part of our budget and
Hmm.
just try something
Hmm.
new, see if it works." And that's how you learn, and that's how you figure out the landscape has shifted. And one of the benefits of working with someone like me who sees a lot of accounts and has seen a lot of brands is I can take
Hmm.
learnings like that and can say, hey, we tested something with brand A and we're pretty sure this will
Right.
work for these other two or three clients we have. Let's try it with them as well,
Hmm.
right? And vice versa. So yeah, it is more complex, but you can be, at least we can be systematic about it and trying to figure out where is the shifting happening and how do we adjust
Hmm.
for it.
Yeah, I'll be honest. If I was starting a brand today, I would not try to do this myself at all. I would absolutely call, a company like yours and just help me get it all together and make me money, navigate those complex waters. Really, that's I think the big lesson that I kind of take away from the world of paid advertising. So in the intake notes, you mentioned some lessons learned, and I thought they were fascinating. They were very, very interesting. I wanted to like dive into them a little bit, if you don't mind, and just kind of ask you a little bit more about in there. Number one on there, you had blended traffic mistakes, cold versus warm traffic. Talk to me about that. What? Tell me what you mean. Drill down on that a little bit more, if you could.
Sure. So it's a little bit different depending on the context or the channel. I should say. So like Google, the biggest mistake I see there is where people will kind of blend your branded and non-branded traffic, which is a big
Hmm.
mistake because your branded traffic, that's where someone searches, your actual brand name. That's
Hmm.
always converts well. They're looking for you. A lot of times they're looking for you to buy from you. So if you
Hmm.
blend that with your non-branded traffic, you're going to get these really skewed results, and it's going to look like your non-branded traffic is working when it maybe isn't working, right? So you got to segment those. It
Okay.
needs to be like a hard firewall between those two. On the Facebook side, I see this. It's a lot more common. I'll see agencies will mix top of funnel traffic, meaning
Hmm.
cold traffic, that people that don't know your brand at all.
Sure.
You're trying to just kind of pull them out of the internet and bring them to your website and get them to buy from you. And they'll mix that with people that are already in your funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the rationale is like, oh well, Facebook's likes these big audiences, and it's true they do. But the
Hmm.
fact is, when you do that, it's the same problem. You're making top of funnel traffic look like it's converting when it's actually not. All
Mm.
right. And a lot of brands are pouring tons of money into top funnel traffic, thinking they're making money off it when they're really not. They really have some bad audiences in there, or it's
Mm-hmm.
people that were going to buy from you anyway, right?
Right.
So yeah, well, one of the first things I look for when I do an audit is to see, are brands mixing this traffic, or is the agency managing it mixing this traffic? Because,
Hmm.
like I said, it's an easy way to make the ads look like they're doing better than they are, and it's really
Hmm.
not necessary. There's a much cleaner way to segment the traffic and do it right.
Nice. Yeah. So, I mean, that was number two on your list, and segmenting done right and done wrong, and we're in the world of email and SMS marketing, and segmenting is huge there, right? I mean, that is, the difference between making money and not making money is making sure that those segments are correct, and that you're actually paying attention to segmenting, because you're going to find these diamonds in the rough that maybe as a small segment, very small but very lucrative, right? What's the approach in segmentation when it comes to paid advertising?
It's probably similar. I mean, so basically, you're trying to assign value to a person. Okay, so if I come
Hmm.
to a brand's website and I am there for 5 seconds, I was there for one page, and then I left.
Hmm.
I'm not that valuable to you, right? Because I wasn't
Hmm.
that interested. Now, if I come to your traffic and I browse 5 or 6 pages and I put something into the cart, obviously that person that does that is way more valuable. They're worth way more money to your brand. It's a smaller group,
Hmm.
but they're worth significantly more money. So you have to treat them accordingly. You can't throw everybody
Hmm.
into the same basket. And without having a lot of wasted ad spend, because most of that money
Mhm.
will go towards the people who didn't show much engagement, and they're not very likely to actually convert. It's not that those people are
Yeah.
worth nothing to you, it's just that they're not worth
Mhm.
as much as the
Right.
people who show higher forms of engagement.
Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, that's
Right.
okay. You can just put people in the correct buckets, if you will,
Yep.
and, correspond and communicate with them accordingly. And maybe not communicate with them at all if they're not,
Right.
if they're not engaging, right? Tell me about number 3 on your list, why your prospects can't hear you. What does that mean?
It's more a question. This is more a question of messaging. Okay, so you can get
Mm.
the ad in front of them, and you can be talking to them. But as we all know, especially as men, right, we can have people talking to us, and we're not hearing it, right? So my
What are you
wife tells
saying,
me,
Leo?
my wife can attest to this, right? It's like it happens, but
Yeah.
it's messaging. It's like if someone, you might have the perfect solution for them,
Mhm.
but if you're not presenting it to them in a way that identifies with their actual need, it doesn't matter. They're
Mhm.
not going to hear you, and they're not going to buy
Right.
from you. And this gets back a
Mhm.
little bit to segmenting, because you can say, someone who has added it to the cart, they probably have different questions than someone who has never heard of it, right? Cold
Mhm.
traffic. Cold traffic, you got to talk to them in a different way than you would talk to someone who knows all about your
Right.
brand, who's been on your email list for
Mhm.
2 years. They've bought from you before. They're just thinking about buying again. It's got to be different messaging, right? So you have
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
speak to them in a way that they can hear you, or that's going to make sense to them.
No, I love that. I love that. And messaging, I mean, it plays into all elements of marketing. We really try to hone in on it, right. When you do a welcome series, when you're welcoming somebody to your brand for the first time in the world of email and SMS, yeah, you're speaking much differently than you would if you were, they had purchased from you before and you're doing a post-purchase, flow in there. Completely different conversation. So similar in there and very important, right? You cannot do the same thing for everything. This is why I go back to, I'll just hire you guys to do it all, because who has that kind of time when you're trying to run a business to operate in that world where unless you have a team, unless
Yeah.
you're a big company and you have your own paid advertising team all sitting there in a room together. I guess that's the exception in that situation. Tell me about number 4, the magic ROAS or ROAS number. Wow. Come on. What's that number? I know you guys quote somewhere between 6 to 12%, but what's that number?
Yeah. So this gets back a little bit to the conversation we had about LTV, right? And
Yeah.
it's really about that. It's brands, they might get it in their head like, I've got to have 3x, I've got to have 10x, I've got to have something X, and
Mhm.
this magic
Mhm.
number, right? But the fact is, unless you've done the math or had someone like me who's got, that analytical, accounting background, who knows how to do the math,
Mhm.
you may not, your magic
Mhm.
number might be completely wrong, right?
Right.
And so you might have a number in your head where you're thinking you have to get this, and really you need something higher to be profitable. Or it could be
Mhm.
that you've convinced yourself you need a higher ROAS than you do, and you're missing out on scale as a result. Okay,
Oh,
if you come to me and
interesting.
you say, Leo, I've got to have 8x, and I say, okay, why do we have to have 8x? You say, well, my margins are this, and this
Mhm.
that reason and that reason, and we dive into it, and it turns out, yeah, your margins are whatever they are, but your lifetime value is higher than you thought. Guess what? You don't really need 8x. And shooting for 8x is really hurting you, because the higher
Hmm.
your ROAS target, the harder it is to hit. And naturally,
Mhm.
the less ability you have to scale. Okay. So if you realize your
Interesting.
magic number is lower, like say it's 5x, you've had a huge drop in what you need to achieve, and now you can scale as a result much more easily.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah. So there is no, what you're really saying is there is no magic number. It's an evaluation that has to be done on each and every business to figure out. So yeah, somebody knocks on your door and says, it has to be this. That's, why? Why?
Right.
Let's break it down. Let's figure out, where you need to be. I love that. And number 5, my favorite out of all of these, testing sets you free. Testing is one of those things I think that a lot of people forget, when they come, how important it is. And, I know that you guys talk about, allocating budget for testing. When we do, email, when we do the email and SMS, we're always testing. We don't know, we have good theories and good understanding of what has worked for some brands and what doesn't, but we're going to know very quickly, right? Whether something's working. What is your approach to testing? How do you guys do it?
So yeah, one thing is definitely having a piece of the budget. We say, hey, we need to play with this. Okay,
Hmm.
we need to try some different things. But in every campaign, we're always thinking, okay, it really comes down to your audience, your messaging, and your offer, right? So we're always looking at a campaign and saying, what can we test on this audience, for example, to see if
Hmm.
we can refine it,
Hmm.
so we can get a better, higher value audience that's going to convert. And so then you dive into the audience assumptions. Okay, what's it built on? What are the underlying assumptions? Is it a lookalike audience? Is it built on past buyers? Well, maybe we could build it on buyers that have bought 4 times from us, right? Maybe that's an even higher
Hmm.
value audience. Okay. Or you go to the messaging and you think, okay, what's the real question? What's the core of the question inside of this audience and how do we answer it? And then you just iterate on that. So one way we might do that is we would say, hey, we've got our best creative. It's this. Well, let's
Hmm.
try 2 ads with the same creative but different messaging above it. Okay, and see which one
Hmm.
does better. Maybe one of them will speak to that audience better than another.
Hmm.
What about a different offer? Will a certain promo work with top of funnel better than it works within the funnel? Right? There's no, I guess, bottom line answer that this is how you test. You just have to look at every element of the campaign
Hmm.
and always be asking the question, what can we try? What can be done differently to see if we can improve on our numbers? Try to beat ourselves, right?
Yeah, no, I love it. It's initiative too. They're not being afraid to test, but having that initiative in place that it is imperative to test. Even when you think something is successful, sometimes you're like, hey, we got it up. Can we get it up even more? Can we hit that number? Can we move the needle anymore? And I think there's always asking a question. Is it possible to move it more? No, I love that. So understanding that paid advertising, provides the all important top of the funnel traffic to your site. I'd like to get your take on, other important marketing initiatives that impact the middle of the funnel and the bottom of the funnel. What's your, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, first thing I would say is they definitely need to be separate. Okay, so you'd have a,
Hmm.
a middle funnel campaign, you'd have a bottom of funnel campaign, and especially when we're talking about social. The
Hmm.
What you always need to be thinking about is how do I pull someone down the funnel? So if someone
Hmm.
is top of funnel, they're cold, right? We bring them into our funnel and we say, where did they land? Did they log one page view and bounce? Did they add to the cart? They kind of place
Hmm.
themselves somewhere in the funnel, right? Wherever they land,
Hmm.
the next question is how do we move them down the funnel? And
Hmm.
so if you're looking at your middle funnel traffic, it's people that have not added to the cart. They've been to the site. They've maybe logged a few page views, or maybe they interacted with you on social or something like that, but they haven't really shown buyer's intent. Buyer's intent would put them in the bottom of the funnel, right? So in the
Hmm.
middle funnel, we're talking to them in a way, and we're presenting creatives, we're presenting offers in a way that's designed to pull them into that next stage. Because that's how you always need to
Hmm.
approach your traffic, no matter where they're at in the funnel. Is how do I get them to take the next step?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, no, that's important. All of these things matter. It's not just about focusing on one element, drive a ton of traffic, and then do nothing else. The end goal, obviously, is the checkout button is clicked, and then also I would say they come back, right? So let's talk about the future of paid advertising. I read up a little bit and kind of trying to keep up with what's going on, and I'm hearing AI and machine learning are being used in the world of paid ads. What's your take on this? And is this a good thing that all this these advancements, or is the human being still very important in this mix?
Yeah, so I used to worry about this more than I do now. Okay, and I think part of it is, we were supposed to have full self driving like 2 years ago or something like that, right? So it's like,
Right. Yes, that didn't work out so well. No.
right, the promises don't tend, they have not tended to match up, right, with reality. And yeah,
Right.
initially when I started to see this in Google and Facebook, yeah, I thought, hey, yeah, in 5 years maybe there won't be a need for someone like me, right? But it hasn't exactly worked out that
Hmm.
way. And I'll give you a quick example. On Google, they have this type of ad where you put in like 10 different headlines, put in like 5 different,
Mm.
descriptions and a few other variables like that. And they say, hey, we're going to mix and match this and we're going to
Hmm.
find the very best, combination to get you the most orders, right? Sounds
Hmm.
great. The problem
Yeah.
is what you end up with is a lot of Frankenstein ads, right? Because you're somehow expected to come up with 10 headlines and five or
Right.
so descriptions that are all going to seamlessly work together and then they do the math and figure out which one works best. Well, when they can start writing those headlines and writing the descriptions and not having them combine into these kind of like sloppy, awkward looking ads combinations, because
Right.
there's how many different variations of those different headlines combinations and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Then I would maybe think, okay, yeah, they've got this figured out. But a human still has to write all those headlines,
Right.
and then
Right.
and then we're still kind of like I'm always worrying, like, man, I don't know how all these, I cannot like possibly go through all the various iterations and make sure these ads are going to make sense and not look like some computer generated mess, right?
Right.
And yet Google is forcing us to use it now, right? Like they're forcing us to use these type of ads. So there's good and there's bad with it. I mean, I think certainly when it comes to optimizing for a specific event, like a purchase or a download or an email submission, they have made huge strides in that. Okay.
Nice.
But I'm not sure anytime soon you'll ever get to a point where you don't need people involved in it somehow.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And, obviously there are a lot of, AI writing sites, Jasper, just the, kind of the bigger one out there. But, those are, I look at them as just as they're like an assistant, they're assisting you in the process. There's no way with those AI, and I'll just relate it to the world of just writing copy ads. It doesn't understand the segment. How would it know how to write a copy for that specific segment? It may know how to write some general, but I think more than anything, it could be just a good guide. Maybe if you have writer's block, you're going to use something like that, kind of help speed things along. But human beings are essential to, the analytics, right? That's what you're going to look at the analytics and you're going to make decisions for these campaigns that you're working on. AI, I just, maybe one day, but I don't, I'm hoping it's probably more a hope that we don't get pushed out, in this world, and they understand, people continue to understand that we need to make decisions as human beings too. Our brains are very good. Right. So with that said, and some of these new advances, where do you see paid advertising in the next 5 to 10 years? What does it look like?
Yeah, that's a really great question. There's so much of it that's a question mark because of this issue of privacy and attribution, right? And Apple really, I mean, they changed it. They changed the game significantly, and it doesn't look like they have any intention of backing down on that. But what it looks like, at first we think, oh, Apple just really cares about the privacy of their users, right? And that sounds great. What I think it's headed towards is instead Apple is trying to co-opt this space more into their ecosystem. And so they're going to have it where, you're going to have some of this attribution clarity if it goes through their ecosystem, right? You're buying through them or they're getting the eyeballs. And I don't know that, but it seems to be that's the direction they're headed, is they're going to have some commerce platform that is unique to iOS, where you will have the tracking that you don't have and the attribution that you don't have on Facebook. So that would be my guess, kind of my prediction. I don't think they're doing this just out of the goodness of their hearts. I think it's a long-term view that, hey, how do we increase our bottom line? In terms of Apple.
Yeah. Well, if they own the data, that's right there. I mean, that's all. That's the most important. They made an investment in data basically, and owning the data, keeping it private. Okay, that's great and nice, but yes, they own it and they can do all kind of things with that data. So nice people over there, but I'm sure there's also some other motive too. There's a revenue generation motive there. So I'd love to hear, you're an entrepreneur, you're a business owner. And we've had some discussions, about growing business and, where you go with this thing. So let's say you've been invited to come and speak at an e-commerce class. Okay. These are graduates. They're going to be graduating soon. They're going to be going off to start their own businesses, and they're going to have an emphasis on e-commerce. What important tip would you give them that would be able to kick their business into high gear, like right out of the gate? What would you advise them to do?
Well, first thing I say is subscribe to your podcast. Absolutely. That's the first thing. Right? Watch all of your episodes religiously.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, I think branding is something I underestimated early in my career, the power of it. And I think often new brands, new companies, when they're putting out a new
Hmm.
product, they don't put enough thought into what is our positioning, what is our
Hmm.
our core offering,
Hmm.
what is really going to resonate with people, because that flows down
Hmm.
to so much downstream in terms of advertising. If you have
Yeah.
really good branding, really strong an understanding of your position in the marketplace, then you now can speak from a
Hmm.
position of power, right? You know what people need. You know they need your products. You know why they need it or why they want it and why they will care. So if you get that straight
Hmm.
from the beginning and you really focus on good, clean, powerful, impactful branding, that's going to flow through and pay back in spades on the ad side.
Hmm. Wow, I like that. I like that, and that's it is. It's very easy not to put some consideration into that, right? You just want to figure out, how does branding make me money? Well, I mean, I think you explained it beautifully. Is that it has that long term effect, and you can see businesses that have spent considerable time getting to know their brand, understanding their brand, and making sure everybody else on the outside understands their brand. So I think that's a phenomenal piece of advice that we should all take into account. And I probably didn't early in my career either. It was about, let's just sell product. Come on, let's just,
Yeah.
how do we sell product? And it wasn't, and now as of, gotten more mature in business, branding was very important. Messaging, all of those things, playing well. So beautifully said. I love that. So now we've I think dissected the world of paid advertising and how it affects e-commerce. Let's jump into some more fun, rapid fire questions. But I always like to say that I actually find the questions above were very fun. I love that to me, understand and really helping business owners out there understand. But let's lighten the mood a little bit, if you will, and get some rapid fire questions.
Sure.
So tell me this, what gets you excited to wake up and tackle the day?
Coffee is a big part of it. It gives you that boost, a little energy to get out of bed.
Uh,
Um, but in terms of ads, I think it's being able to see the brands that succeed, and it's
hmm,
like we having being a part of that and saying, yeah,
yeah.
I was able to take a company from nothing and then into a Shark Tank appearance and then into a multi-million-dollar brand, right? That's year in,
Hmm.
year out, week in, week out is producing results for them, for the owners, for their employees, for us, for everybody, right? That's gratifying. So I do enjoy that a lot. Yeah, seeing brands grow from nothing into something or from something into something great.
Love that. Love that. Great answer. Well, that you answered number two. What's your drink of choice in the morning? And it sounds like it's coffee. But what kind? What do you? How do you take it?
Yeah, so I alternate between coffee. Typically, I'll do black, maybe a little bit of cream. I do not like sugar in my coffee at all, no sweetener.
Hmm?
So maybe I'll sometimes there's something called bitters. There's like a chocolate bitters. It's kind of like
Oh,
yeah, it's kind of like a vanilla extract, but it's chocolate
oh,
flavor,
yeah.
something like that. So that's really nice.
Mm,
And then the other drink I try is it's called mate. It's an Argentine herbal tea, but it's
mm.
also got caffeine, so kind of give you a little boost. I switch back and forth between those two.
Nice. I love that. Appreciate you sharing. I'm always curious to how people take their coffee. A lot of just black, nothing else, no fancy.
Yeah.
But I like to put a little, I like a little something. Definitely don't. I agree with you on the sugar. No sugar in there. But I will try the chocolate bitters. That's a very good recommendation. So
Yeah.
tell me, besides the job that you're doing today, running, the business, what else would you be doing if you weren't doing this?
I do like to build things. I've done a lot of kind of major home improvement initiatives over the
Oh,
past few
okay.
years. Like, I mean, just like most of it I did myself. And it's really gratifying to say, hey, we did an addition on our house and I did, 85% of it. It's kind of a cool thing to look at and say I did that, right? But then again, I also fell off a ladder and got kind of badly hurt at one point. So I may be kind of retired from that sort of initiatives going forward.
Mm.
But I'm into crypto, that has taken a big hit lately, of course. It's more of
Oh,
a kind of a hobby, and learning how
sure
to
has.
trade it. I don't trade it with as much capital as I maybe once did, but I do like to be in the space. I like to see where it's headed and kind of play around it.
Nice, nice. Oh, that's good. And yeah, I am not a home improvement person. I like to do home improvement, but I'm generally the one who hires out to get that help. So I'm always in awe of somebody else who can actually do all of those things in there. My wife is actually very good at many of those things. So yes, respect for anybody who does their own and can save that money too. By the way, not have to hire a contractor in that situation. So tell me, what's your go-to SaaS software or app on your phone, the one you just cannot live without?
For my business, it's ClickUp. I mean, we made a big push for, systematizing everything, getting SOPs written. So I wanted to be able to say to my clients, look, we have a system that we're following. It's not just in my head. It's not just me remembering or hopefully not forgetting to do something. Right. It's like, and I could have it all in my head, but I'm still human. I might miss something. Right. Whereas if I have a task and I have it broken down, I say, hey, this is what I'm doing on these clients today, or my employees are going to do on these clients today. We know things aren't going to fall through the cracks. So that's been a huge boost to not only productivity, but also accountability and just making sure that everything's getting done the way it should and when it should. And I can always tell my clients, hey, look, we promised you we'd do something and we're doing it. Right. So I love ClickUp. It's been a huge benefit for us internally.
Yeah. No, high five on the ClickUp. We use it too. And yeah, I get maybe a nod to Brent Weaver and the entire UGurus team for helping us systemize our businesses and get ourselves organized, because it does make what we do for our clients even better. Right. And I think that's, the system is, just getting into those systems is huge. Not something people jump up and down about doing, by the way. Right. It's not like, hey, let's systemize. But when you do it, you come out of it better, stronger, and then ultimately your clients benefit from it as well. So that's phenomenal. So if you were to give yourself one talent that you don't have, what would it be?
Oh, man. I mean, are we talking superpowers? Or are we talking about?
Yeah, throw that in, dude. Let's talk superpowers.
Gosh, for me, it comes down between invisibility and the ability to fly. Flying would just be fun. I went skydiving a couple weeks ago for the first time.
Oh, wow.
It was awesome. I mean, I didn't really want to do it, but my 18-year-old son kind of shamed me into it. So, so I actually did it, and it was cool, man. So I'm like, yeah, flying would be awesome, but being invisible would be cool too. Like how many times have you wished to be a fly on someone's wall to just be able to, I wonder what they talk about, and people are, so that could be fun, although it's kind of, not cool to eavesdrop, I guess. But so I'd probably go towards flying. Let's say flying.
Okay. Yeah. Apple wouldn't like you in the privacy side of things. Mr. Invisible would not play out. But yes, wouldn't it be great to know like what people are saying about you or about the service that you're offering them? And then all of a sudden you make changes. You're like, wow, look at God, they listen so well over there. They're so great.
Exactly.
So tell me, you deal with a lot of e-commerce businesses, but you must also be a consumer out there and you're buying things online. What is your favorite online store and why?
Favorite online store. Okay, well, I probably should plug a client, but I'll have to. I wish this brand was my client. How about we'll say that? True Classic. I love their marketing. True Classic T-shirts. The T-shirts are great. They fit well. They're not hugely expensive or anything. And as you said, their videos are hilarious. They do a great job of coming up with fun content. I like to watch their ads just because they're fun and entertaining, right? So I like that store a lot. I like RevTown. RevTown is they sell really high quality jeans. They're a tad expensive, but man, they fit great, and they're by far the best jeans I've ever had. So those are probably my top two.
Wow.
And if they're listening, I want to run your ads, both of you. So call me.
I love it. I will check out both of them and we'll put the links in the show notes. I'm always fascinated by, and there's so many brands out there, right? You're not going to come across every single one. Are you wearing one of the True Classic T-shirts right now?
Yes. This is the V-neck. Nice. I like the V-neck. It's nice, but they just fit well and they're very comfortable. I like them a lot.
True Classic. You got to call Leo. Okay. All right. And maybe he'd work for T-shirts. I don't know. You just keep sending T-shirts. At least maybe 1 month, 1 month in there. It's a lot of T-shirts. That's awesome. Well, it's that wraps it all up. And Leo, I got to say, one, love the topic. Two, you're amazing to speak with you. The wealth of knowledge and the approach that you take in there. And I'm so happy that we got a chance to meet you, and now working with you, and partnering up, and just really sharing that e-commerce knowledge out there that hopefully helps and benefits our clients on both sides. So truly appreciated for the wisdom that you brought today, and we are going to slice and dice this into all kind of bits that we can get out there, and hopefully people will take the information and benefit. So appreciate you coming on and taking that time today.
Thank you, Ramin. I really enjoyed it.
All right, that brings us to the end of another episode of the E-commerce Revolution podcast. Don't forget to check us out on YouTube. If that's where you're listening, look at all the past episodes on YouTube, as well as any of the podcast networks that you subscribe to. If you need email and SMS help, reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you. Mention this podcast and we will give you an audit on your email and SMS worth $850. You can reach us at hello, HELLO, at skuagency.com. Thanks very much, everybody. See ya.
This is just the beginning.
If you enjoyed this episode of the E-commerce Revolution podcast, please subscribe to our channel on YouTube, or drop us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thank you very much.